Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. In today's lesson we are talking about a rather strange topic: how to make something look dead with visual effects. After being asked to do some shots for a short film, I quickly realized that there were no tutorials out there about this topic. So I wanted to share with you a technique that I came up with to achieve this effect. So let's jump in and see what it's all about. Okay, so how to make something look dead through visual effects. So I know that this is a strange topic, and most of you might or might not need this in your career. But if anything, I hope that you learn a couple nice techniques through it, because these techniques can be applied to other things. Mostly it's going to be about tracking and just kind of general visual effects work, and how we might approach something like this. And for me, this was something that I'd never done before either, so it was a challenge for me to figure out. Because first thing I did is I went online and how do you make something dead? How do you take the life out of something? Kind of a weird tutorial to look for, and kind of a sensitive topic to search for. But the reality of it is that this work does need to get done, and it's something that I was asked to do for my friend Joe Roberts, who's a director here in Amsterdam. He had created, or was creating, a short film called Kelly, and it's a comedy. And basically in the film there is a dog that dies, and there's a handful of shots where we need to see the dog lifeless. So the challenge that I was faced with is, well, how do we do this? Joe had already been in touch with some people that do taxidermy and props and whatnot, but props are way too expensive, and taxidermy just look like taxidermy, look fake. So that's when he came to me to see if there was another approach. So I'd never done this. So the first thing I did is I ran to the tutorials, and nothing there. So I had to start thinking, well, how do we do this? And the technique itself is quite simple, actually. And if you have a slight familiarity with tracking in general, then it should be super easy for you. And if not, you'll have it after this lesson. So without further ado, let's jump in and do this. Okay, so for the first shot of two, we're going to start with the simpler one, so you get the general concept. So what we have here is we have a locked off shot of the dog that was hired to play dead. And what's happening, if you look closely, is obviously you're going to see him breathing, but you're going to see also his eyes are moving, his paws are moving, stuff like that. He's moving, he's alive. Thank God. And then in the background, though, you're going to see that there's some shadow movement that's happening here. So what would be nice is if we maintained the environmental stuff so the shot feels real. And then the only thing we want still is to be the dog. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create two plates. All right, so we're going to create a plate that has all our movement for the background. So we're going to maintain all the shadow detail here and whatnot. And then we're going to create a plate for the dog. So I'm going to duplicate this plate right here, and we'll call this dog still. Okay, let's solo this layer, and then let's create a mask around this dog. It can be a very loose mask just to kind of isolate it. Move fast here, because it doesn't really matter too much if it's a good mask or not. You can always adjust it. All right, so we have our mask, and this is going to be our dog still. Okay, so let's go to frame 1, and let's take frame 1, and what we want to do is we want to make this dog still, right? We want it to not be moving, because it shouldn't be moving, because it's no longer alive. So let's go and right click, and you can go to time, enable time remapping. Okay, that's going to create our keyframes. And then let's put a hold keyframe on here. It's Control Alt and click. We'll give you a hold keyframe. And then now all of a sudden we have just a still dog. And so if I turn this back on and then I hit play, you'll see that right now we're still maintaining the shadow area, but the dog has stopped moving. Now this is good because, I did this super loosely, but this is good because now we still have this background area, but we also have the other stuff happening. And actually I want to just bring this mask in just a little bit more so we get all the shadow detail from over there. And then it's always good practice to put at least a little bit of feathering on stuff. Like let's do like 5 on here, I think, because nothing is just like in 3D. Nothing is ever a perfect 90-degree angle. Same concept with masking. You know, like this, nothing is ever perfectly, just cut edge in real life. So I think it's better to actually have it not be like that. Okay, so I'm seeing a little bit of problems here. So I think what we should do is we should just bring this in even a little bit more. Because if you're really watching, you can see that through here, that's looking better now. I might just bring it in just a little bit more. Sometimes it's good almost to overlap, because that way, if there is some spill from the other plate, it's good to do that. Great. So now what we're seeing is we are actually seeing, I'll come back out here. We're seeing the plate as it should be, but just the dog is not moving. And then what we can do from here is you would need to regrain it because now all of a sudden we don't have the grain that's happening in the film. So we would apply a regrain to this plate on the top, and then maybe like a post effect move just to make it feel a little bit more natural, in the sense of like maybe there's a little handshake in there, camera shake, excuse me. So this is obviously a simple technique, and then this is going to build up to our next shot, which is going to be a little bit more advanced. So on the next shot, what we have is we have a wide shot of the dog, and the camera is doing a nodal pan and panning over it to reveal. This is the first shot that you see of it actually being not alive. Okay, so let's give a quick preview here so you can see. So basically what happens is camera pans over, and then you'll see that it's actually still breathing here. So we want to fix that. But again, we have a couple nice things going for us. So when the camera stops panning, it freezes. So that's good. It comes to a locked point, and then it no longer moves. So that's good. So what we should think about is where we want to actually take our still frame from, because what we want is we want this dog to actually be fully in frame. He needs to be fully in frame. And then we also want it so the camera is not moving. Okay, so let's go maybe to like right here. Let's just shuttle through this, and that's where I'd say the camera, I think I have it marked here actually. Yeah, right here. Looks like the camera's still drifting a little bit. We'll go to maybe here. And I also want to take it when the dog's stomach is down, because if he's not breathing, his stomach should be empty. So let's mark that. So what we have here now is essentially our hero frame. So we can just label this hero frame. And this is going to be the frame that we're going to base pretty much everything off of. So what we have is we have a locked off camera that's no longer moving, and we have the dog that is still. Excuse me, not still, but his stomach is rested and he's fully in frame. So that's what we want. So the idea, what we're going to eventually do here, what we're about to do, is we're going to take this frame, like what we previously did in this shot. We're going to take this and we're going to track it to this pan at the front, because the difference now is we have a pan to deal with, but this dog is still breathing. So we want to take this frame and we want to pin it to this pan. So the dog, the frozen frame actually moves with the camera. And this will work because we're doing a nodal pan. And with nodal pans, you don't get perspective shifts. Now, all a nodal pan is imagine if a camera is set up on a tripod and you're just rotating it. You're not moving the tripod, you're just rotating the camera itself. And when that happens, you're not going to get a perspective shift. So foreground and background won't change. So this is good because this means that we could actually do a planar track for this. We can actually take this dog as like a card, and we can track him into the scene and get away with it because there's not much perspective shift. I mean, if you look, I mean, essentially this dog is pretty much the same the whole time. You know, he's just going in and out of frame, and obviously he's breathing. So let's do that. So the first thing is keep our clean plate. We know that's where we like it. Let's duplicate this. And let's do dog still. Okay. And then for our dog still, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut him out. Okay. So we're going to cut him out. And then now we have the problem of, okay, we have this cutout, which we need to do a hold frame. Control-Alt-T will also give you time remapping. Let's set a keyframe there, and then let's just pull it all the way back here. And so now I'm going to delete this last keyframe too. So now we have our hero keyframe for the entire time. Okay, so what we need is this hero keyframe here to be tracked on. So for this tutorial, we're going to be using Mocha. And for those of you who are not familiar with Mocha, it's a 2D planar tracker. And 2D planar trackers are different than like 3D trackers and 2D point trackers, as in they look for planes, essentially. That's how they track. And it's most of the time used to track in something that has a plane. So let's say like this grid here, you want to put a sign or something. A 2D planar tracker is most of the time what you would want to use for that. Whereas like a 3D tracker is like, okay, I need to have a ball roll through here, and I need to know what the entire environment is. And for that, this wouldn't work because we actually need the information of this dog. We need to treat this like a card. So let's do that. So let's go and let's take our clean plate actually, and let's go up to animation, and let's go track in Boris Mocha. Okay, so if you've never used this, it can be a little bit, I guess, foreign at first, but there is nothing to be scared of with it. It's pretty straightforward once you get to know it. Let me turn this off. Okay, so let's go here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to click this button here, this Mocha button. And what this is going to do, it's going to launch the other program, the program of Mocha itself. It's going to take our frame range that we had within After Effects, so 832 to 1200. So it's already gotten our frame range, and I've just pre-done this so we know where to be. All right, so let's see. So let's pick a frame that's going to be our friend. All right, so ideally it's going to be a clean frame, and it's going to be yes, if you can get it static, great. That's what you should do. Always start with a static frame if you can get one, and as full clean of an object as you can. So if we zoom in here, we'll come to the dog and come up here to your pen tool. And what your pen tool is going to do, it's going to look like a mask, and it can be a mask, but in our situation, basically we're telling it what to track. So this is telling Mocha what to track. So you're just going to click around, and when you're done, you right click. So basically you're saying track this. This is essentially the information I want right here. I want this information in here, and I'm going to do something with it. In our case, we just need to position information. So we've got this now, and it's also important to note that when you're doing this, you actually want it to be like a garbage mat. You don't want it to be, I don't want to come in here and roto every single little piece of this dog, because what the program is going to do is it's going to look for contrast in the scene. It's going to look for things, it needs information to grab onto. And if you're just doing this dog, there's going to be no contrast that's happening between the dog and anything else. It's just going to be the dog, so it's not going to know what to track. So it's always good to give padding around the sides. And just because I've done this shot before, I know me getting this carpet and this leg is pretty helpful in here too. So I'm going a little bit further out. So when you have that, it's instantly going to lay a keyframe here. And you know, if you have a tougher track, you can add keyframes if you need to, like down the line, and make adjustments. But for for the most part, you want to try to keep it as clean as possible and let the program do the work for you. All right. So just to familiarize yourself a little bit with the software, these are your play controls. So play, end, beginning. I think this is like loop, stop, normal stuff. And then this is your tracking information. This is where you actually go to track. So this is the track forward, track backwards, and then this is if you just want to go one frame in either direction. Up here you have your layers panel, and I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but you can do things like, oh, I don't want to track this layer, like you can turn the tracking off. But basically whichever layer is selected up here is whichever one has these tracking icons on here, it's going to actually track all of that. So if I had 20 layers and they all had tracking icons, it's going to track all of them at once. All right, so that's like the ultimate basics of it. It's a pretty simple program and usually it just works right out of the box. It's really, really good at what it does, and I've been using it for years and I really do enjoy it. All right, so it's simple as that. So let's just go ahead and let's track in this direction. I'm gonna go ahead and track forward. Even though it's locked off, I figure actually let's go back and let's track backwards, because tracking backwards is gonna be what we really need. And if there's something not right with this mask, we'll go back and adjust it. So I'm gonna pause this while it tracks. Okay, so it's finished the track, and you'll see right away it did a pretty good job to begin with. I don't see much slipping in here. And one thing that Mocha I've always been so impressed with is when stuff goes off screen. So watch here. So it's gonna go off screen, and it just can kind of figure it out, like where it would be. And it is slipping a little bit, but honestly in this case it's fine because we're just using the position data. And all that matters is what we're seeing. So whereas with like a corner pin, it might be different because you would get stretching. But for this, I think for position data, it's fine. So you'll see it does a really good job at kind of maintaining everything as it goes along. And I actually don't think we need to track the second half because it's just locked off and there's no point. So I'm going to say that this is good. And at first try, I mean, like that's how good this program usually is. Usually like twice is the most you would have to do. And I didn't really adjust any settings. So it's pretty awesome just straight out of the box. And this isn't really a Mocha tutorial, but it's more of just like a, hey, maybe get familiar with it if you haven't. So all right, so now we got that. Now this is specific to After Effects. So if you have After Effects, it's built into it, and you don't have to pay extra for it. It just is. So what you do is you hit this button right here, which is the save button. Okay, so we save that, and then this is kind of weird, I always thought, but you exit out, and then when you exit out, it actually comes over here and to your plugin, and it's like piped in that data. So you have to hit. And I think it's a little cumbersome, but you have to create tracking data. Okay, so when you create the tracking data, it's going to say what layer. And me being sloppy, I just called it layer 1, but this is the layer we called it within Mocha. So layer 1, okay, cool. And you see right away, it puts in all this information. And what this is actually corner pin information, which is actually what we don't need for this. A lot of people use Mocha for corner pinning. And real quick demonstration of what that is, if you're not familiar, let's just do something that's like, I don't know, 700 by 700. And let's say that we wanted, let's change this to something besides white. Let's say that we wanted for this red square to be in here. All you would do is go Effects, Distort, and then Corner Pin. Haven't used this in forever. All right, and then put that here. And Corner Pin basically just distorts based on 4 corners is all it is. So what would happen is Mocha it does create corner pin information, and then if this, like I said before, if this is what we were replacing, it would put this in here perfectly. Boom, we'd be done. Great, everyone's happy. That's actually not what we're doing, but it's just good to know it's there, and that's most of the time actually what Mocha is used for. What we want out of this is we want the transform information. So we've got the transform information, and it's all right here. You have their center, so our X and our Y. Rotation, there's no rotation. And then our scale, and scale shouldn't change either. It's really just the X and Y values that are going to be changed. I guess it's scaling a teeny tiny bit. More than I would expect. Well, we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's go And you can also hit U and you'll see all your keyframes down here. So let's create, it's always a good idea to create a null. Whenever you're doing a repo of really anything, I think it's a good idea to create a null, because if you ever want to come in and like adjust the original plate, you have the option of doing that without screwing up your keyframes. Let's create a new null. I'm forgetting my shortcuts here. All right, so we're gonna call this tracking, and now that we have our null, that's going to act as our position data. So let's go to the clean plate. And now we need to tell Mocha what to do with this data. So we have all this data, but what do we do with it? So we know we don't want a corner pin. We don't want a corner pin with motion blur. We want to transform. So let's go to transform. And then where do we want to apply it to? Okay, we want to apply it to the tracking null that we just created. So 1, 2, 3 is just your layer numbering. Okay. And then as soon as I hit apply export, I'm going to go to my position here. You're going to see it's going to apply keyframes to here. Okay, so now we have this tracker that has the position data of what we just tracked. So let's take that, and this is very important to know that you want to parent your still frame where your hero frame is. So you should always parent it where your hero frame was made. Because if I come here and I parent it like here, watch what happens. I mean, right now you can already see my hero frame. You can see where the mask is. It's right here. So what's going to happen is it's going to be offset. Watch if I do this. I got to turn it back on. It's going to be like all off. So it's super important your parenting when you do it. So your parenting should always be on the frame that you create as your hero frame. So let's go here and let's parent that to the tracking. And right now I think I have one of my effects off. Yeah, there we go. Maybe it's nice to actually see what's happening with this. So now what's happening is we're taking our dog still and we're parenting it to that tracking position. So now when we play this, let's watch. We can see the new clip that's being put in there. Boom. And then, yeah, pretty much still off to the races after that. So that's great. So, I mean, first try. I mean, this is how it was the first time I did it too. It was just like Mocha just works so well. And this shot was planned well too, because we, talking about this, it was more about like, okay, don't have too many, because if you have shadows crossing him, then all of a sudden you're going to get into problems, because if shadows are crossing him, you would, like if we had a tree shadow coming across him, you would expect to see that moving on top of him. Then you would have big problems, because then you'd have to start either recreating that or rotoing it out, and it would be a mess. So we really talked about, don't have shadows crossing. If you have people crossing, that's fine, but be a little roto work, and try to keep it so there's not too much perspective shift. So now let's put it so our grade or our LUT is back on. And you can see, we can see our edges here, and there's a reason that we're seeing our edges. The reason why we're seeing our edges is a couple. It's what we talked about earlier. We need to add a little feathering here. So let's do like, I don't know, 10. That might be too much. So now we have feathering. But also what you're going to see is if we go to our hero plate, this dog is like really out of focus. So let's actually put some blur on him. And I think I use, let's go, yeah, camera lens blur. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to try to eye match it. So let's go to our camera lens blur, and right away it's already kind of close. I'd say that almost matches as far as the blur is concerned. I think that's pretty doggone close. All right, and you'll see the dog is shifting, and that's to be expected. I mean, there is a little bit of, as this camera's turning, the dog is going to look different at different stages. So it's to be expected that it's not going to be a frame for frame because the camera is turning and it's going to look a little different. So I think for the blur, actually, we just got lucky. So let's set a keyframe for that. And then let's just see kind of how it progresses. Okay, so it looks like through here, I don't know, maybe here or something, it's done. So we want to turn our lens blur down to 0 here. Okay. I would even go further because it looked like it was still going in and out. All right, so we'll turn our lens blur down around here. Maybe a little sooner. It might be tough to tell on the video, but I can tell the nuances here of like when it's in focus and out of focus. General idea is try to match. I don't want to like bore you. Try to match the lens blur, and we're pretty close here. So that's gonna make it feel better. Another thing that's happening too is we have a still frame right now, and still frames don't have motion blur. And we need motion blur. So let's turn on our motion blur because that's going to help too. As this dog is coming around, we're going to get that subtlety of the motion blur of as the camera is panning, and that's going to actually add more realism as we're moving through too. So it's important to do that also. So let's make sure that we have motion blur on, camera blur, and then you also want to regrain it at the end. Because again, even if something is still in real life, if you're shooting on a camera, there's going to be some sort of grain, whether it's from film or digital. And you'll notice there's a couple mistakes here as you go through here. I can see that the dog's nose is showing. So right here, it's probably tough for you guys to tell, but simple fix. If we just turn back on our mask, again, I thought I might have it up too high. Put it down to 5% and just bring your mask out just a tiny bit. Like that, and then all of a sudden his nose is gone. So it's just little tweaks like that. But the general concept is create 2 plates, have a clean plate, and then have the plate that needs to be treated. Okay, so let's check out the final shot here, and I think it looks pretty good. I mean, again, this is all first try. Yeah, I'm sure if I got in there and really studied it, there might be some nuances I might find, but I think for a first try, this is pretty good. So if this was helpful to you, please let me know. And if you like more of these visual effects tutorials, let me know. I can dive deeper in the Mocha if that's something you're interested in. Or if you just found this just to be interesting, something a little offbeat, I can try some more of that. And I will see you on the next one.